New Orleans Saints head coach Dennis Allen has named Andy Dalton the starter moving forward. What this means for the rest of the season, and what does this mean for Jameis Winston's future in the Big Easy? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all podcast apps and on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media. You find me over at CrescentCitySports.com, USA Today Saints Wire, Tuesdays Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You just pick 2 to 5 players, choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their Prize Picks projections. You get those right, and you can win up to 10 times your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match of up to $100 by using the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. Today, we're going to do a two a day today, because this is going to be our first Thursday episode, though I will drop it Wednesday night. And then we'll also have our crossover episode with your boy Q of Locked On Raiders. But I needed to get an extra episode out for you today because the New Orleans Saints have announced that that Andy Dalton will be the New Orleans Saints quarterback, quote unquote, moving forward. Why the New Orleans Saints made that decision, what it means for the rest of the season. Have we already seen the floor for this team? And what does this mean for Jameis Winston's future in the Big Easy as well? We're going to break all of that down on our first episode of the day. So let's start off with Andy Dalton's season. Looks like it's going to be going for the rest of the way. Does that mean just for this Raiders game this Sunday, or does it mean possibly for the rest of the season? And ladies and gentlemen, buckle up, because it is time for the Red Rifle Show pretty much for the rest of the season. I want to read a couple of quotes here from the conference call that we did with Dennis Allen on Wednesday afternoon, where he said that it's an offensive decision. Jameis Winston is healthy right now, and they are not moving forward with Jameis Winston. They are moving forward with Andy Dalton. And I will tell you, even though I'm on the other side of this decision, I think that the Saints should move ahead with Jameis Winston, lean on the ceiling. You're 2-5. What do you got to lose here? The New Orleans Saints, they have their reasons for going with Andy Dalton, and they say that it's an offensive decision. Dennis Allen said, quote, "What I mean by that is that in the last 4 weeks, one of the top 4 offenses in terms of moving the ball. Saints are on top of, or one of the top offenses in terms of scoring points. That's the name of the game." And then with one more sort of additional clarification, he said, "Jameis Winston is back healthy right now. We're going to go with Andy as we sit here right now. And if we continue to play well offensively and move the ball offensively, Andy will stay in there." So Dennis Allen effectively saying that as long as things continue to go the way that they're going with this New Orleans Saints offense, as led by quarterback Andy Dalton, that it will be Andy Dalton the rest of the way. So what is it exactly that the New Orleans Saints do see with Andy Dalton? Where are the Saints sitting currently right now when it comes to total yards as well as passing yards in the NFL? And how does Andy Dalton have an impact on that? Saints are currently second in total yards, just behind Kansas City. They're fifth in terms of total points scored as well at 175. They are 8th right now in passing yards, 7th in passing touchdowns, which is 12. Kansas City leads the way there as well with 20. So when we look at the first 3 games with Jameis Winston, because those totals, those sort of rankings encompass the 3 games that Jameis started and the 4 games that Andy Dalton have started. The first 3 games of the season, the Saints were 8th in total yards, so 6 spots down, 24th in total points, so 19 spots down, 8th in passing yards, same place, and then 16th in passing touchdowns, so 9 spots down. But since week 4 with Andy Dalton at the helm, 2nd in total yards behind only Kansas City, 8th in passing yards, again, pretty close to the same there. 3rd in terms of passing touchdowns with 8, Cincinnati's right in front of them with 9, Kansas City at number 1 with 12, and then 3rd in total points, 124. First place is Seattle with 136, only 1 point ahead of Kansas City at 135. So the Saints, over the course of the past 4 weeks, have been consistently a top 5 passing offense, a top 10 total offense with Andy Dalton at the helm. I think that's what the New Orleans Saints are reacting to. And while some might say, hey, Jameis was injured, which I agree, he had the fractures in his back. He's still not even a year removed away from his ACL injury, which happened on Halloween Day last year. He still hasn't even hit a year since then. And of course, he's had this ankle injury that has kind of been pestering him since training camp. The other side of that argument will be people saying that Andy Dalton hasn't had Michael Thomas or Jarvis Landry. So for me, like whatever side you sit on, you have a good argument in terms of here. Like I said, I sit on the Jameis Winston side of all of this, but I understand where the New Orleans Saints are coming in when it comes to Andy Dalton. It's like I keep saying with the old Chris Rock reference, right? Like in fact, I'm going to get him to help me out here. I don't completely agree, but I understand. That's just the way that it is. So I understand what it is that the New Orleans Saints are looking for. I got a soundboard and I was able to use a little Chris Rock there. That was fun. And there are clear arguments against Andy Dalton as well, right? In this last game, he threw 3 interceptions, 2 pick sixes back to back. He effectively contributed to what was a 17 to 21 point swing in that you handed them 14 points on 2 pick sixes and you threw an interception in the red zone that at worst should have been a field goal. So that's a 17 point swing. If you would have scored a touchdown there, then you're talking about a 21 point swing. You also know that you lose your ceiling or really it puts a lower ceiling on this New Orleans Saints offense in terms of downfield ability, but that, as you can see, hasn't stopped the New Orleans Saints from moving the ball, whether it be through the air and, of course, the contributions they've been able to get in the ground game. And there have also been several additional turnover-worthy passes that have been dropped or even defended by a receiver. We saw Juwan Johnson a few weeks ago knock a ball away from a defender in the end zone. So there are these plays in these moments that even Andy Dalton doesn't look like he is much better than Jameis Winston under center. And so that's why I say go with the ceiling, but the Saints would rather the higher floor if that's what you're really getting with Andy Dalton. All in all, this team is making its decision based upon the fact that it believes that Andy Dalton's quarterback performance has maximized the offense's performance. We've seen them with big point outputs. We've seen them with big yardage outputs over the course of the past little bit. I have a hard time believing that if you brought Jameis Winston back, which this is what I would do, by the way, I would bring Jameis Winston back once he's healthy, and they're saying that he's healthy now, but they're making an offensive decision here. I would bring Jameis Winston back and put him in control of an offense that is akin to what Andy Dalton has been running over the course of the past 4 weeks, as opposed to sending Chris Olave on 21, 22 different routes, 15 to 20 yards downfield. Operate a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, but attack downfield when you want to and when you can and when those opportunities present themselves. Be a little bit more of an opportunistic offense as opposed to one that's looking to live vertically. And that's where I think Jameis Winston, the difference between Jameis Winston for the first 3 games this year and then the 7 games that he appeared in last year came down to what was the offense built around. The offense last year was built around and predicated on setting up, attacking laterally, and then taking shots downfield when they presented themselves, like we saw with the Deontay, then Harris, now Hardy touchdowns in the Washington game, in the Green Bay game, all of that. And then even in the preseason where we saw the 2 shots to Marquez Callaway down the field against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which ultimately won Jameis Winston that job. So this gives you sort of the opportunity here to say, okay, let's put him back into that offense and see if he's able to do that. The issue is that it's week 8, right? So you are running out of time. You kind of have to make a decision here. So you don't really have the ability to say, okay, let's get one more look here and let's get another look here and let's look at the evaluation, blah, blah, blah. You had the mini bye. You kind of have to make a decision here moving forward. So that part I completely understand. But the decision to move forward with Andy Dalton is one that I question. We'll see, though, if it ends up working out. I can't tell you how wrong I'd love to be. The good news is that we may have already seen the floor for this season with Andy Dalton at the helm. How many times is he really going to throw 3 interceptions and 2 back-to-back pick sixes? You're right to kind of assume that that's not going to happen very often. So what does that mean for the New Orleans Saints moving forward for the rest of this season? We're going to break that down coming up next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our sponsors over at Bird Dogs. So I want to tell you about Bird Dogs first because I absolutely love Bird Dogs. I have a pair of the joggers, a pair of the shorts. Absolutely love everything that they do. Whether you're somebody that goes golfing all the time, they're perfect for that. If you're somebody that goes out for runs all the time, goes perfect with that. If you're somebody that just wants to lounge around the house, they got sweatpants for that as well. And the most comfortable ones you're ever going to find anywhere at all. So make sure you go and check them out today. You want to hit them up over at birddogs.com. And don't forget right now, which is our special deal with them here at the Locked On Podcast Network, is that you can head over to Bird Dogs today, birddogs.com, and enter the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, and they're going to throw in a Bird Dogs rope hat for you. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see it at the bottom of the screen. That's birddogs.com, promo code LOCKEDON, and boom, a free Bird Dogs rope hat with your pair of Bird Dogs, with your pair of Bird Dogs is on the way. The most comfortable shorts, pants, sweatpants, built-in liners that you're going to find. You will not take these off. I promise you that. And whether you're looking to pop the question, celebrate a milestone, or find another one of those timeless jewelry pieces that you also are never going to want to take off, Blue Nile can help you find what you're looking for and can help make those celebrations even more memorable. As the original online jeweler, Blue Nile offers the largest selection of independently graded diamonds priced significantly below traditional retailers. They've helped millions of couples create their perfect engagement ring, perfect gifts, perfect Mother's Day gifts, whole bunch of stuff for you to check out, because Blue Nile's bench jewelers will help to make sure that you are getting something handcrafted for the perfect one-of-a-kind engagement ring as well. They do some really cool stuff over there, including experts on hand 24/7 to help you find a memorable gift for every single budget. So make your moment sparkle with Blue Nile. Go to BlueNile.com and use the promo code LOCKEDON, and you'll save $50 off of your order of $500 or more. That's BlueNile.com/LockedOn to save $50 on your purchase of $500 or more. BlueNile.com, promo code LOCKEDON. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. The New Orleans Saints have made a big decision here, saying that they're going to be moving forward for the foreseeable future, at least, with Andy Dalton. What does that mean for the rest of the season? And have we already seen the floor of what this New Orleans Saints offense can be with Andy Dalton at the helm? So we got that coming up for you here on today's episode of Locked On Saints. I appreciate you, as always, making us your first listen here today. For your second listen today, make sure you're also checking out Locked On Sports Today as well, from all the games that matter the most, the biggest stories all across sports. Go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes with the local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. So have we already seen the floor when it comes to Andy Dalton? And is that good news for the New Orleans Saints? Andy Dalton threw for 4 touchdowns, technically 6, up against the Arizona Cardinals. Unfortunately, 2 of them went the wrong way, so 4 touchdowns. He also had 3 interceptions, though. So did the team, and then on top of that, you had the defensive concerns as well. Nearly another 100-yard rusher. Kyler Murray kind of able to pitch the ball anywhere that he wanted, as long as he wasn't throwing at Alante Taylor, who had a fantastic game that game. So was that the floor for the New Orleans Saints, though? Is that as bad as it gets? Because if so, the Saints should be able to improve on that with the talent that they have on their roster. Now, they have to be able to prove it, right? You got to put these things out on the field. We've been talking about the improvements that they've needed to make since week 1. Tackling, turnovers, penalties, all these other things. They're still there. It has been an issue for them, for sure. But if the defense does find a way to improve, if the roster does find a way to finally get healthy, which Wednesday's injury report did not look great. Still don't have Michael Thomas. Still don't have Jarvis Landry in practice. Still don't have Adam Troutman back. Still don't have Marshawn Lattimore back either. You did get Peyton Turner back. You did get Andrews Pete back. Andrews Pete back for the run game is awesome. Jameis Winston practiced in full, but you didn't really take many steps forward in terms of those superstar players that Dennis Allen was saying, hey, we hope to have them back after the mini bye here. So that was kind of the whole point of not rushing them back in the first place, was because, there's the mini bye. Like, that was the thing that was pacifying all of it. Now the mini bye is here, and these guys aren't in practice day 1. Now we'll see if they're there day 2, day 3. I will tell you, Michael Thomas was present. He just wasn't, he was listed as DNP for the practice, but he was in uniform. He was in his pads. He had a helmet, all of that. So we'll see. Maybe that means that he's taking steps forward throughout this week. We've heard ramp up about Michael Thomas all offseason. That worked out in the offseason. Maybe that's going to work this week. But if you don't have these guys this week, you got to start asking major questions about this training staff, about this medical staff, about their rehabilitation process. Like, there's so many things to ask questions about at this point, because they were supposed to get better in terms of injuries. They haven't at all. Now they've lessened the soft tissue injuries, so the Matt Rhea hire is paying off, but now you have all of the other injuries, the sprained ankles, the ankle rolls, the abdominal injuries, the hip contusions, like all these other things, right? Like, you're still dealing with all that. Anyway, I digress. You get the roster more healthy. And then if Dalton's able to be more consistently efficient and doesn't have another 3 interception game, which is considerable, right? Maybe you have like one of those games a season or something like that. And then if the run game continues to lead the way, which means you're taking the ball out of Andy Dalton's hand as well, then maybe you can pick up some momentum here. But can the Saints do that, right? Some of these things you just kind of have to see, like defense and health. We haven't seen those things get better at all so far this season. So you can't really put your faith in them getting better. All you can really do is say if they do get better, then the Saints will improve. But is that going to happen? That's what we're going to have to wait to see. The issue for the New Orleans Saints, especially, is that, or especially when it comes to the offensive side of this game, is that you have to be able to throw the ball without turning it over. And the Saints have the absolute worst turnover margin in the NFL right now. And that's not just because of fumbles and things like that, although they have had those fumbles. But you've got Andy Dalton throwing 3 interceptions in a game. You got Andy Dalton throwing throwing multiple interceptions in multiple games. And so you have to watch out for those things, of course. But then one of the ways that you kind of curb that is by leaning into the run game. But then the more you lean into the run game, the more that defenses stack the box. And then the more that you're forced to throw. That's what Arizona did last week. They stacked the box against the New Orleans Saints. According to Zebra Sports, our friends that help to kind of orchestrate everything in terms of next-gen stats and everything, 63.64% of Alvin Kamara's running back snaps were against a stacked box, meaning 8 or more defenders on the field for the Arizona Cardinals. So they went into that game saying, no, we're going to make them throw the ball. And then what happened? 3 interceptions, 2 of which they took to the house. So you have to be able to show everyone that, like, yes, we see where the improvements are, and the improvements are starting to be made. But until we have that sort of evidence on the field, even in terms of getting players back on the practice field, we're not seeing those things right now. So we might have seen the floor for the New Orleans Saints, but are they going to be able to get up from off of it anytime soon? That's the question that they now need to answer, especially if they're making this emboldened decision of saying, yeah, moving forward with Andy Dalton. Ironic, too, that it would happen on the same day that, like, Mark Ingram is over on the Up and Adams show with Kay Adams saying, we need Jameis Winston back. And speaking of needing Jameis Winston back, if he's not going to be back out on the field at all this season, then what does that mean for his future in the Big Easy? We're going to break that down as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Before we get to that, though, I get the great pleasure of telling you about our friends over at Simply Safe. Today's episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Simply Safe. Simply Safe is awesome. I use it. Glass detection, hazard detection for things like floods and fire and all this other stuff. Outdoor cameras, outdoor keypads, whole bunch of stuff that you're able to utilize to make sure that you're keeping your home safe. They've got 24/7 professional monitoring systems as well. Simply Safe's agents will simply give you a call the moment that any type of a threat is detected, and then they will be able to send dispatch, all of that stuff, first responders in case of any emergency, whether you're able to be reached or not. So even if you're not home or even if you can't be reached, they're still protecting your home. And they have some proprietary advanced response technology as well. So they can actually visually confirm that there is a break-in in progress or something like that to make sure you get the highest priority when it comes to that dispatch. You can customize your perfect system at home today in just a few minutes over at simply, S-I-M-P-L-I, safe.com/LockedOnNFL. And you can save 20% on your Simply Safe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month for free. Visit simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation, wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints with a quick conversation around what this all means for Jameis Winston and his future in New Orleans. Because let's face it, if Jameis Winston doesn't hit the field for the New Orleans Saints again this season, it's very unlikely that he'll be back next season. So this could be it for the Jameis Winston story here in the Big Easy. And that's kind of sad to say because we saw the flashes, we saw the potential, 14 touchdowns to 3 interceptions just last year. And now we're 8 weeks into the season that was supposed to be his. And he's been unhealthy. He's been injured. He's been a little kind of erratic with the football. We've seen it with Andy Dalton as well, not to take away from Jameis. And so, we all were talking about sort of the evolution, the growth of Jameis Winston coming into the season. And now, not even halfway through the season, it feels like his time in New Orleans is already coming to a close. Now, the way that you see Jameis Winston back out on the field this year is if the New Orleans Saints offense begins to sputter out, right? So we were talking about in our sort of first piece today, what it is that the New Orleans Saints might be seeing that leads them to making this decision. eighth in total yards, second in total yards in the last 4 weeks, eighth in passing yards, third in passing touchdowns, third in total points. All of those things are coming from, where the New Orleans Saints have been with Andy Dalton. So if that starts to plummet and you start getting into the bottom half of the NFL there, then you could see the Saints then turn course and go back to Jameis Winston, especially if they're still in the mix for everything. But, it has felt like, or it feels like now, that unless that happens, Jameis Winston's time in New Orleans is effectively all but done. I mean, the Saints went and did everything that they could to try to bring Deshaun Watson to New Orleans. Couldn't get that done. Then they ended up spending that money all over the place, which I thought was a better use of their money than bringing in that. And part of the way that they utilized some of that money was by bringing Jameis Winston back to New Orleans. But they brought him in on this 2-year deal that really from the very beginning felt like a 1-year deal. Didn't really feel like it was one of those situations where the New Orleans Saints said, okay, we're fully committing to Jameis Winston for a 2-year period. We'll give him a 2-year contract with some void years on the back end of it, all of that stuff. But then really it's kind of a 1-year deal. It was a 2-year, $28 million contract with a full guarantee of $15.2 million, but they gave him a $14 million signing bonus right off the bats. And then his base salary going into 2023, keeping the 2021 one low, is already $12.8 million, which means that if you decide to move on from him, that's $11.2 million in dead cap that you have to carry into the next season where you're already $54 million over the salary cap. So it would have been most beneficial for the New Orleans Saints to keep Jameis Winston in that case, unless they come to some type of an agreement with him to restructure that base salary in 2023 as a means of keeping his hit low before he ends up moving on. That's something that the Saints have done before. They renegotiate those contracts, things like that. We see that across the NFL actually quite a bit. So that could save the Saints some money over there, but it does put them in a little bit of a bad situation because now, is Andy Dalton going to be your quarterback going into 2023? Because you don't have the first round pick to show for anything, at least at this time. We'll see what the Sean Payton trade potentially yields in 2022 or 2023. I think Los Angeles, the Chargers, is like the most obvious place that he could end up. And then you'll see at that point, you get what? Hopefully you get 2 first round picks out of that trade. You're going to get a pretty late first round pick, which isn't out of the ordinary, even if you use the John Gruden trade as a sort of construct for this or as a comparison for this. The pick that the Bucs knew they were trading was a 21st overall selection. So that's probably about what you're going to get for this this version of the Los Angeles Chargers. You trade that pick and one of the 2 picks that you would have then in that case, if you're getting a first round pick for 2024 in that deal, that was going to give you 2 first round picks in 2024. So you trade your one in 2023, one of your ones in 2024, you move up, you draft a quarterback. Sure, we can see that path from this far in the hypothetical. But is that really the way that all of this pans out? We don't really know. And so I think that for New Orleans, like making this decision is one that kind of eliminates one of your options for your 2023 quarterback situation. And maybe that's what the New Orleans Saints want. Maybe they're okay with that. Maybe Dennis Allen's okay with that. Because make no mistake, Dennis Allen will be back as the New Orleans Saints head coach in 2023 because they're not going to move on from him after just 1 year, especially when you're doing all of this quarterback shuffling. Now he gets to basically say, hey, wait. And we talked about this from the very, very beginning of the season. He now gets to pull that card and say, wait, let me try with the quarterback that I want to work with. Because he wanted to go out and get Deshaun Watson, couldn't get Deshaun Watson, effectively settled in bringing in Jameis Winston in that case, brought in Andy Dalton as a backup. Now they're switching to Andy Dalton midseason. And so Dennis Allen gets to say, wait, that was Sean's guy. Jameis Winston was. Let me get my quarterback in the building and see what I can do. And then they make some potential changes at offensive coordinator, which aren't off of production because, again, you're sitting right now in terms of your total season at 2nd in total yards, 5th in total points, 8th in passing yards, 7th in passing touchdowns. But, you still probably look for somebody that is a little bit more of a quarterback whisperer and a quarterback developer because you don't really have anybody on staff in New Orleans right now that has proven they can develop a quarterback outside of Ronald Curry.
Nasty.
So when I look at it from that perspective, I think in that case, Jameis is probably finished in New Orleans unless the offense goes in a complete nosedive and they turn back to him. And again, this is a sad ending to that story if that's the case, because you love the redemption story. And look, I'm in the facility. Like I talk to Jameis all the time and we get to speak with him and talk to him and everything. And like you get to know these people as people, right? As human beings. You're like, okay, that's the type of person, like that personality, where he is right now. I know he has an embattled past. There's no hiding any of that. But where he is right now is that you look at him and you say, okay, that's a person that you'd like to see turn things around and succeed. And now you might see that, but you're not going to see it in the city of New Orleans. So it leaves a big lingering question mark no matter how the rest of this season goes. If the New Orleans Saints still turn things around and everything, gets better and they take control of the division in some way, or they continue to be in that division battle and they get to the playoffs or they're close to the playoffs, whatever it might be, even if all that stuff turns around, now there's kind of this cloud over the New Orleans Saints because you don't have a first round pick next year. And there's not enough in terms of what you're looking at thus far that says, okay, the New Orleans Saints are in a good position for what it is that they need in terms of quarterbacks for next season. That's still going to be a big thing that they have to figure out. But you know what? That might be, for the New Orleans Saints, their 2023 problem. Their 2022 problem is, how do we win games right now? And that's a big one that they have to answer before they get to any of that next year stuff. But all in all, sad way to see this potentially come to an end in terms of what Jameis Winston's story in New Orleans will be. So thank you so much for making Locked On Saints your first listen today. For your second listen, you can go and check out another episode of Locked On Saints if you want, because later on you'll have the crossover Thursday episode, myself, your boy Q, breaking down everything you need to know about this upcoming game between the Saints and the Raiders. I'm going to tell you this much. The New Orleans Saints don't just need to win. They need a statement win this week. I'm going to tell you how they can get it in that episode and in that conversation with Q. Otherwise, though, and until then, make sure you go and check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast to make sure you're getting all of the good stuff that you need from around the world of sports. That's big game recaps. That's the take of the day. That's all of the biggest stories around the world of sports, instant reactions, all that good stuff. You can find it available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Appreciate you, as always, y'all, for making me part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. And as always, if you see me, say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation, I'll holla at you.